careful what you say.
I will.
Whole crew just went to the back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't want to start late, but we'll give it a little bit.
Oh, that's good.
I can talk faster, or I can talk slow and spread it out.
Fill up the time.
Use my, what did I used to call it when I was a middle school teacher? It was my time fill skill.
All right. Come on in. Sit up front. Sit where there's a piece of paper at least, but come right up front. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. We are delighted to have Dave and Kathy Coffey talking about their book, Designing Math Adventures. And I have some wonderful news, which is that our plan was to raffle off these books, but we were able to get enough for everybody who's here. So instead of announcing who won the raffle, you all won the raffle.
You get a book, and you get a book.
The table to go pick up your book is, there's a table in this hallway between here and where your other sessions were. There's a speaker table and a speaker room there, and there's a book table there. So stop by there after the keynote on your way back to the other sessions or on your way back to lunch and grab your book. All right, so without further ado, I will hand it over to Dave and Kathy.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I think it's probably should say too that the funds for the books came from the Berry Design Thinking funds here at Grand Valley that is dedicated to this idea of trying to support the teaching and learning of design thinking. About a month ago, Kathy and I were fortunate enough to go to a conference in Tucson called the Mead Conference. So Mead is Mathematics Education Appreciation Day. It's a day where a bunch of teachers in Arizona come to learn about mathematics. But as the name suggests, one of the things that we found particularly dynamic and quite honestly a little bit emotional was this idea of the appreciation, right? The entire day was meant to think about appreciating the work of teachers and in particularly math educators. And we like that vibe, we like that message. And so we wanted to let you know that we're honored to be here, that we know how hard you work. We see how much you care. We know that you have lots going on outside your life. You're checking to see how kids did today in their game or on something else. We know that there's lots going on and that you took a day off, as if that really exists for teachers, right? That you took a day off to be here to help contribute to the improvement of our profession. We're honored for that. And we wanted just to let you know that we recognize that. We also want you to know that there are people outside the profession who recognize it as well. Kathy and I were at Meyer Gardens on Tuesday and sat with two lovely women. And as soon as those women found out that Kathy was a retired teacher, they went on and on and on about how important teaching is. They might have been a little drunk, but that's truth serum, right? And so there are people who recognize your work, and we want to make sure that we recognize it as well. And to be able to say that we appreciate you and we appreciate what you do. This is one of the reasons that we wrote Designing Math Adventures, and that was because we wanted to support teachers. We know how much you do, and we felt like, we stumbled upon, quite literally sort of stumbled upon this idea of an approach that might make the work of teaching, if not easier, at least supported. Okay, and so we wanted to share that with you today.
So we would like to introduce a tool that that actually Dave introduced to me. I introduced him in the book, introduced him to the teaching learning cycle, and he in turn introduced me to this tool called the Innovator's Compass. And so we would like to introduce that to you, and we would like you to do a notice and wonder. And if you would use your phones and click on that QR code, it will open up a Padlet. I know it's tiny on your phones, but
It's better than trying to do it on a Google slide.
yeah.
Believe me. If you want, there's also a tiny URL, MNA25E. And if you're not familiar with Padlet, over here on the side is a note. And you can come over here and you can put what you notice, and maybe you notice the colors. And if it's too small, tell a neighbor instead. This is helpful for us as an assessment. We can
Yeah, it's working.
and then wonders on the second frame.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
What'd you get?
Nothing. It's not loading.
Oh,
Oh,
are you on the internet?
Yes.
Oh, the internet's so talk to each other then. What do you notice? Because again, this is the key, is that you're thinking about it yourself. We are certainly using it to make some observations. We can maybe address some of your wonderings, but at the very least, and if you're online, you want to put those in the chat.
Mm. Yep. Does it have to go? Does it have to go in order?
When would I use this?
Mhm.
So you can continue this. Again, this is a nice place for us to store our thinking. It's something we can come back to and address, especially questions you might have, as a reminder at the end. Innovator's Compass was developed by Ella Ben-Ur. Ella is a MIT trained engineer. She worked for IDEO, which is arguably the largest design thinking firm on the planet. And she now teaches design thinking at Olin College in Massachusetts. Her her reason for doing this is as a project manager for IDEO, she worked with lots of people who were not familiar with design thinking and got caught up on some of the aspects of it. And she wanted to create a tool, a simple tool that people could follow that could help them to get unstuck if they were finding themselves at an impasse, or give them direction if they were in uncharted territory. What's nice too is that all of this is free for anyone to use. No one's trying to sell this to anyone. And it's used by lots of teachers. One of the questions is, when will I use it? It's used by lots of teachers. If you go to her website, innovatorscompass.org, there are all sorts of resources. There's also lots of videos, and there's some examples of how teachers have used it. Some English language arts teachers have used it to help students organize papers. Much to Ella's surprise, one of the ones that she asked, if you use it, just contact her and let her know how you're using it. The one thing that, especially in elementary schools, it's getting used more than anything else. Anyone want to guess? Where are lots of things happening in middle school or elementary school? The playground? Playground conflicts. They're using Innovator's Compass during playground conflicts to figure out these 5 questions: who's involved, what's happening and why, what matters most, what ways are there going forward, and what's a step to try. And they've invited the students to be a part of this so that they can figure out ways forward from these sorts of conflicts. Okay. What we're going to do is talk about how teachers can use them to help improve their practice, especially around mathematics, but also more general.
Excuse me.
So Kathy is going to tell a story.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a story that is near and dear to my heart. One of my last years in the classroom, I had a student, Alex. The names are pseudonyms, by the way. And I wish that I had had the compass at the time, but I didn't. But we're going to give this as an example of how I could have used I sort of intuitively went through these steps, even though they're not necessarily, one of the questions was, do you use them in order? Not necessarily. Can populate them as thoughts come to you, but how we could have used this had we had this tool. So this story starts with Alex, who for the first 6 weeks of school spent most of his time either with his butt in his locker and his coat over his head, or running away. There were woods behind our elementary school, running away, or under his desk, and just pretty, troublesome behavior that disrupted, overturning tables. I mean, we had to do reverse timeouts, that sort of thing. But pretty much not a whole lot of teaching was happening because of the behavior problem. And you might be wondering also, why are we talking about this and not about math? This is a math conference, right? Well, no math learning happens when these kind of situations are happening. And you have to get that under control first before you can do any meaningful math or any other kind of teaching. So that was the observations of what was happening. And for me, I was very fortunate. I actually thought she might be here today. Anne, who, again, it's a pseudonym, was the impact leader at our school. And we worked very closely together, trying to figure out what to do here. And I'm eternally grateful to her. So I say thank you, Anne, because she was both my cheerleader and my challenger. She, challenged some things that I believed in. I changed my thinking around those. But we decided what matters most is we wanted Alex to be successful, productive, and engaged. And that would also then allow the other students to be successful, productive, and engaged. And so we decided, so you can see now we're not doing this all in order. So then what did we do? Well, we did. She did a behavior assessment, and we looked at the behavior assessment results. We came up with, plan number 1, behavior plan 2, 3, and 4, and nothing was working. I mean, it'd work for a day or two, you know, and then it just would fall apart. So in utter frustration, because we didn't know to put the student in the center, I mean, or we just didn't, I don't know, think about it. That's the reason this tool is great, because it keeps reminding you of putting that student in the center. Anne sat down with Alex and said, what do you want? Like, she was like, what do you want? And he said he wanted to work here. He wanted to be the janitor. He wanted to be I think he actually said sweeper, as I recall. Anyway, he wanted to be the janitor. And so she said, well, what do you need? And he came up with a list. But the other thing that happened is that it changed what matters most, right? By putting Alex at the center, he wanted to be a janitor. That means belonging and contributing and belonging to the school was what was important to him. So that would have gotten added to that. He wanted to be the janitor. He said he would need, this was hilarious, actually. I can hardly tell, it was his face. He said he needed a name tag, which I actually still have in a file at my house. He needed a closet, but we used a locker. He needed something to sweep with, and he needed a place to clean. He wanted a cell phone, and intercom, and tickets. I mean, this is all him coming up with all of this stuff. And Anne drew the line at cell phone. No cell phone would be needed. So we came up with a behavior plan, I guess, number 5, or who knows what number at that point, where he had a strip on his desk, and I was the awarder of the tickets. He'd put these tickets on his desk, and he could earn them. And it was, I mean, it was really subjective. I could see if he was getting agitated and he didn't have enough tickets to go to the office to clean. I could give him a couple more for noticing what a great job you're doing sitting there, listening or whatever. And so he would earn a certain number of tickets to be able to go to the office to clean. And he would go to the locker was near the 5th grade, one of the 5th grade teachers, and she had one of those, restaurant sweepers is what I call them. He would make a big deal. Oh, it's time to go do your job. He'd put on his name tag. Once he got out in the hallway, I would call the office. They'd take the hole puncher and dump some things on the floor, right? Because he had to have something. It had to be real. It had to be real for him. And he would go and sweep, and he would come back happy as a clam. It seems extreme, but it was what was needed. And in a pretty short amount of time, he was feeling like he was belonging, contributing to the school, and he was more successful. Wasn't perfect, but it was more successful, more productive, and engaged. And a lot more teaching happened. Much more time was spent sitting at his desk instead of under it, and he wasn't running away anymore, those sorts of things. So the important part of this is that teachers you work hard and you do a lot of this sort of thing intuitively. Anne and I didn't have a compass to go to, but you do these things intuitively. And our hope is that the compass can provide something, a framework for what you already do intuitively to make it more intentional and to help really keep that reminder that students are at the center of, or whoever's for whatever purpose you're using it. For our purposes today, students are at the center of your work.
Yeah, it really serves for us as a metacognitive tool, making sure that we are filling the compass, that we're addressing all 5 of these questions. I am not afraid to say that prior to being introduced to design thinking and the compass, even though I knew about the teaching learning cycle, that I lived a lot down here on the bottom of the compass. I did a lot of details, right? I knew what was going on, and here's what I'm going to do about it. And as a result, I ignored a lot of times what mattered most, and I definitely didn't come up with a bunch of ideas to do it. I got stuck thinking about doing it one way and sticking and doing it that single way. And I certainly sometimes was not paying attention to what students were doing. I was a middle school teacher. They certainly tried to let me know, but I was telling the group last night, my second year of teaching, I could have told you exactly what I was going to do on February 22nd, because I had it all planned out. I'd spent my entire summer, I'd given up my summer planning, and by golly, I was going to teach that way on February 22nd. And my students were not happy. It was my worst year of teaching. And so the big key here is that thinking of this as a metacognitive tool. And as Kathy says, we often ask at least some of these questions already, but how do we ensure that we're asking all of these questions?
And the other thing that came out of this is that what we design, when you're using this design thinking, what we design for one can be transferred to the many. And this ended up, before this, I was completely against external reward systems. Completely. It just did not fit in my philosophy at all. But this convinced me, and it ended up morphing into tickets for everybody, because that also then didn't just single that student out. And they came up with the ideas of what they wanted to do. So a couple of girls wanted to go back to their kindergarten teacher and kindergarten classroom and read to this year's kindergartners, right? So we came up, well, how many tickets do you think that would be worth? And so we ended up creating this whole menu. And then from that point on, it was something I did each year after that. They created their menu and they would come up, usually they said way more tickets than you really should have, but so if they said, well, how about 20? Well, let's do 10, or whatever. So, wanted to get those quick rewards, quick turnarounds. So I made the arrangements. Did it take a little bit of extra time? Yes, but most of them were simple things like for 5 tickets, they could sit in my rocking chair while I did the read aloud and I sat on a student chair. For some number of tickets every Friday, I would have lunch with whoever had that many tickets, that sort of thing. And so for what we designed for one, really ended up being for the many. And it just really helped create a really nice collaborative learning classroom where everybody was encouraging people, each other to get tickets. And of course, some hoarded them and didn't spend them at all, but they certainly had the opportunity to.
So the book's filled with stories like that. So, and since you're all getting it, we're not going to spend any more time talking at you. We want to support you and give you a chance to practice with the compass yourself. So as you're doing this, you need to start by thinking about, is there a place in your practice where you feel stuck, right? So if we're thinking about the title of the talk, it's this idea of a zoo. Do you feel a place where you're caged, restrained, covering the same ground over and over and over again? The compass is a way for you to start thinking about finding new ways forward. Or is there something on your horizon that I got to do this brand new project? I have no idea what this is going to look like. Okay, it's new territory. I'm going to be on a safari. Safari is Swahili for adventure, for journey. It's something new. And so maybe that's the case. But whatever that is, whether it's I'm trying to get out of a rut, and again, I say rut not in a derogatory way. Ruts have a purpose. They keep us safe. They're comfortable. We can let the horse do the work and we can sleep because we know things aren't going to go off. All right. But if you're ready for something new and want to get out of the rut, what would that be? And you can write that on the top. Or is there something on the horizon that's going to be a new challenge for you? Maybe it's a new curriculum. Maybe it's a new lesson. Maybe you're working with teachers in a new way. Maybe you've got a new position. Put that on the top. But start by identifying not everything is a design challenge. Not everything requires a compass. Okay. But for you, what is the thing that you want to work on in the next 30 minutes? Hopefully at the end of that time, you'll have some ideas of an experiment to try on Monday. So take a moment and write down what's your challenge? What's your design challenge? Everybody have something? Thumbs
If you
up?
can't think of something related to school, can also be something personal. I don't remember if we put it in the book or not, but we actually used it to, we have a little fiberglass, one of those little shell campers, a scamp camper. And we used the compass to actually help us design what features we wanted in it. So you can use it. It doesn't, I mean, it's great. You can even do lesson planning with it.
Mhm. I've had students who've used it. They were going to do a Thanksgiving Friendsgiving, and they used it to try to figure out what that was going to look like. So again, you've asked how it can work. Those are some of the ways. So as Kathy said, we don't need to follow the order, but I'm just going to go through the order because time, as some people think, is linear, and we have to go through some order. So I'm going to follow the order. Ella will tell you that order is not intentional. It's just because people like me, oops, sorry, people like me needed an order, okay? But she's great with you jumping around as long as you're just being thoughtful about where you're putting it. So start by thinking about, with this challenge, who's involved? Who are the people you might be working with? Who are the people that it might impact? If you're thinking about a lesson, it might be your students. If you're thinking about a coaching session, it might be the teacher. But it might also then, if you're working with a teacher, impact someone else, like their principal or their colleagues or their students. But start thinking about who's involved, and know that might not be an exhaustive list at this point. You can always, as you're thinking, go, oh, there's one more person. Just like Kathy said, oh, maybe we should think about Alex, right? Alex is involved here as well.
Mhm.
Take a moment and jot down who's involved. So next, think about observations. These are things that have happened or are happening, and you want as much detail as possible. Okay, so what are some of the things that are happening around this challenge? Or what are some, if it's a new challenge, what's some maybe things that have happened around similar challenges in the past? Okay, if it's like I'm having to do a brand new curriculum, well, there's a good chance maybe you've done a brand new curriculum or something new in the past. What works? So Ella has two frames here, and those are supposed to represent this idea of what works and what needs work. Okay. Now, some of what works, you might say, oh, I'm just going to do that. That makes sense. Hold on. If you want, go ahead and put that up in ideas as a placeholder, but don't fall in love with it yet, because you might get some other ideas. Again, this is simply meant for you to be able to organize your thinking as you're thinking about ways of moving forward, of either getting unstuck or addressing a new challenge. And as you're doing this work, again, more details might come up. Oh yeah, we did this. Go ahead and add it here. Take a moment and write out your observations, what's happening and why. When I'm doing this with student teachers and they're thinking about using this in their classroom, we often talk about, so what are your students feeling? What are they doing? What are they saying? What do you think they're thinking? And again, so that they're getting a full range of what's going on in their classroom. Okay, so they can make an informed decision about what matters most. in this upper left-hand corner is talked about as being the guiding principles, the North Star. Ella put that star in there as a reminder, is this ought to give us some direction. Okay. And again, while we're in observations, we're diverging, we're getting as much information as possible. When we're in principles, we want to converge. How does that all fit together? And as Kathy showed, those might be different, right? Some people might have a different one. The people involved might be different than yours. And it's okay to have more than one there, but you want to somehow try to meld those or combine those so you can figure out what matters most. Sometimes people are hesitant to put anything there. What matters most? I don't know. It's okay. Put something down. As Kathy showed, you can always change it. Okay. It's just a start. One of the things people often notice is that this is a circle. It's a cycle. It was one of the reasons we made the connection between this and the teaching learning cycle, is that idea that, you know, what you're doing, sometimes we feel like in our classroom that we have to be perfect on day one, right? Some of my students who've had me before will tell you that I start my first day apologizing because I'm not going to be perfect. I'll be better the next time because we go through this cycle, and I'll learn about things to be better about. So write something down to give you direction, even if it doesn't end up being what you ultimately find as being the most important. So what ways are there? Now we're looking for ideas. And Ella intentionally puts it up here with this idea of big picture and future. You don't want to have too many details here because, again, you'll fall in love with it. So what are some, maybe there's some of the observations you made. What can you move up here that you might try to get unstuck or try as you're looking for new horizons? What are some other things ideas that maybe you've heard here already at Math in Action that you might want to apply?
There are no bad ideas either. So any ideas, in fact, sometimes the most off the wall ideas end up being, if not what you end up using, they lead you to some other connected idea.
Yeah, we were telling the students last night, I have a conflict on Monday. I'm supposed to be in 2 classrooms at once. And how am I going to do that? And I've been agonizing over it. And finally, I'm like, what would I tell my students to do? I tell them to get out a compass and try things out. And so I went through the step and I got to this and I thought I'd be clever and funny. I was trying to get a laugh in my classroom. I said, oh, I could clone myself. Wouldn't that be cool? Where are we in cloning technology now? And then as I'm thinking about that, I'm like, well, I don't have a clone, but I know someone who's pretty closely aligned with my thinking. So I literally texted her, said, Kathy, could you help me out on Monday? And she's like, what time?
As long as it's not 8 o'clock.
It's not, it's around 11. And so, so again, some of those wild ideas might not be what you'd end up doing, but it certainly does help you to come up with a solution going forward. One of the ones that I often now tell based on Kathy's story is if this is a problem where there's a mismatch for a student or for a teacher or for someone else, one of my ideas ought to be ask them.
Mm-hmm.
Why not? Find out what their ideas are. Include them. One of the mindsets of design thinking is radical collaboration. And that idea of radical, we often think about as being maybe in a negative sense, but in a mathematical sense, right? What does it mean? Get to the root. And those students are the root of our work, or those teachers that we're working with are the root of our work. And so engaging in radical collaboration. The other thing that, as Kathy says, I often try to give a prompt, and that prompt is somehow related to the day we're on the 22nd. That's the V is the 22nd letter of the alphabet. And so make sure one of your ideas involves a vampire. It can be maybe something to do with blood. It could be maybe a bat. Students and teachers love acronyms. They sometimes, very able mathematical person in radical expression. I don't know, but have something. I mean, I swear I didn't memorize that. It's not my notes. Come up with something that is related to a vampire. And there are no bad ideas. So this is where we've done, and we've done a lot of this individually, but creativity craves collaboration. And so what I'd like you to do, to whatever extent you're willing, is find a partner, share what your challenge is, share some of your ideas. If you need to provide some context with the observations, share that, but get their feedback and their ideas to contribute to what goes up in this spot. Okay, does that make sense? It can be somebody who's sitting near you. It can be, if you know the person near you has no good ideas, go find somebody else. But check in with somebody else about what it can be triples, if that, I didn't even count to see if we're even numbers or not. But take a moment and share your challenge and at least your ideas. And again, if they offer something, don't judge them, just add it on. Come up with what you're looking for here is at least 10 good ideas, or 10 ideas. Sorry, I used good. 10 ideas. Go ahead. If you already have 10, excellent. No, perfect. Yeah, good. You're going to now meet with everybody. Anything on the chat or?
Someone has to be online participants get books.
Oh. The answer is no. I mean, if they want to contact me, I'll give them a PDF. It doesn't have all but or I can give them the link to where they can buy them.
Right. Yeah, I was like, we're not gonna
No,
do
no.
postage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to pick it up.
So see, you could do this part. No?
Well, I'm watching you trying to memorize what you're saying, and I'm not as intimately, I'm not as intimately familiar.
That's
but
fine. That's fine. Why don't, at 22, why don't you just remind them to make sure both people get a chance to share?
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm? Oh, yeah.
I think it would be this for us, but yeah, so it's not necessarily. I just want him I don't even know what I don't like. I want to know about
Hasn't been a,
Hmm?
hasn't been a lull here. Is it
Yeah,
20?
yeah.
Okay. So if I could have everybody's attention, please. I love it. I love seeing everybody so engaged. So if you have shared, can you make sure that the other person in your partnership has a chance to share? So if you haven't both shared, switch now. Thank you.
So I don't think you ever, I mean, this was what I was doing behind the scenes with what you were doing, right? So this is the math recovery assessment piece. This is identifying what they need most. This is coming up with ideas for our next intervention. This is now what the experiment that I'm going to try, and here's what happened. So this is what was happening on my side of the course.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's why I love the math recovery you combined with it, because it just fits so seamlessly. Yeah. So I just wanted you to know what we were doing. Yeah.
So do 5 minutes before.
Yeah.
Yeah, like your story's so cool. Can you tell me more about it? Never mind.
Yeah. So then, like 5 minutes for the
Idea or the what to try experiments.
yeah, and then you can either give them a chance to connect with a colleague to briefly share their experiment, or you can just move on. So let's see how long.
Okay.
I don't know how you still want to.
So pardon the interruption. It is hard to interrupt at this point. Just do kind of a check-in right now. Think about, I mean, just the feeling in the room, right? There's an energy in the room when you're collaborating, coming up with creative ideas, not judging those ideas. There's a whole different feel in classrooms, in staff rooms when that's happening. And again, I believe teachers deserve to have that feeling, that creativity humanizes the work that we do. Not just because it puts people at the center, but because people are inherently creative. And we crave that. And so making sure that we're making space for that. Too often we're doing this work in isolation, and that's why we are overextended, and that's why we are exhausted. We need to find a way to make this sustainable. And again, that was another reason that we wrote the book, was that as we were reading about all of these ways, and so much is people are telling you more things to do, we didn't want to tell you more things to do. We wanted to give you a structure that could take what you're already doing and organizing it. Okay, because we feel, I mean, I'm a math professor. I am telling you a little bit of what to do, right? But fortunately, I had a first grade teacher and then an elementary math specialist next to me who would remind me, no, teachers ain't going to do that. And so, yeah, and so that was very, very helpful.
Or let's see how that works out for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Nice segue, because that's the next thing we need to do now is an experiment. Take your ideas and identify. So now there are bad ideas. You're free to look at, we've again, if you don't know, there's a pattern, right? Divergent, convergent, divergent. Now we're going to converge. Come up with some specific details that you might use in the future by combining some of these ideas or selecting one. And if it's ask them, what are some of the questions you might ask them? Okay, who might you ask? What are the details? When will you do it? If you're just saying something like, I'm going to ask them, that's not enough information. That may never get done. Ella talks about this idea of someday and Monday. Okay, if you don't have enough details, then there's a good chance you're just going to do it someday. If you want it done Monday, you need to have some details. So take a moment and pick one of, or combine some of your ideas, and then jot down what are the details associated with that. So you might be able to do it, maybe not Monday, but at least next week, you could test something out. Okay, take some moment and fill out your experiment. See how that works for you. The very least, put a time, a day that you're going to try this out. If you can't commit to that, it might be too big. You might need to narrow it down. Hmm?
It sounds like it might be time to share.
Sure.
No.
So take a moment and just share with your neighbor what's your experiment. Hopefully they're not going to be too disappointed if you didn't pick their idea. Let them know that it's up there. You can pick it next time. Take a moment and share your experiment with your partner, please.
You did all that already. Oh, I kind of thought that might be happening because of the little buzz in the room, but the people who are following, rule followers. Right. And make sure both partners get to share.
So what you gonna try?
So it was a long story, but I teach math, and intermediate algebra primarily.
Yeah.
And my intermediate, I feel so bad because in LS, I'm teaching them how to teach, and then I go teach pretty much lecture style.
Oh, uh-huh.
So I'm
Been there.
Questions or comments for people online.
So I'm talking a little bit about flipped classroom.
Oh, nice.
And we were talking about the little whiteboards.
Oh.
To make sure they're participating.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to factor, but you have to show it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have
Well, so I was telling her that too. When they put in our smart boards, they took down
all the
all
whiteboards?
the whiteboards around the room. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, what are you
Not
doing?
not helping.
No.
Again, talk about design, not thinking about the people at the center.
Right.
Yeah, we ended up getting some of those. We wrote a grant and got some of those movable ones so that people, our faculty, can check them up, because we sometimes teach in classrooms like this that only have one board in the front. It's very much kind of the old style, and we want to do some of the building thinking classroom stuff. And so we made a list of, well, we can start by doing the randomized grouping, right? That's a small step that I can do. We can hand out and make sure that they're working together. We can do some of the giving them a problem to try before we tell them how to
Did you
do
go-
it.
is this
Those,
from Kevin Dykeman?
especially if they're, but yeah, that
He was at-
whiteboards is
he was
such an
at
easy one.
Tucson,
But yeah,
and,
I
went to a
actually have
session,
a former student who
and
does it
got some
with
little
the old
pattern block.
overhead projector, and has them right on that, and then erase and stuff. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
good,
And
nice.
I may or may not have hoarded a bunch of those markers. So yeah. Mm-hmm. As easily, yeah. Well, that's a good note. No, yeah. I might write that down for my ideas regardless. So, pardon the interruption. Hopefully you had a chance. Hopefully you had a chance to share your experiments. Sometimes in class, what I'll tell them is try out your experiments on somebody else and have them give you some observations of what they think might work and what might need work. One of my elementary student teachers the other day came in and was talking about a student like Alex, who was disengaged and disruptive. This was a third grade student, and she wasn't quite sure what to do. Hadn't got to the point of asking the student what's going on, but this said, can my experiment just be changing seats? Sure, why not? That's something you could do. So she changed the seat so that the child was closer to her, and now she could keep a better eye on. I mean, and that's an old one, right? I mean, we've been talking about that since I was teaching middle school, right? Changing seats. But it was more than just changing seats. She started building a relationship. She was able to see it wasn't just about proximity changing behavior. She was curious about what the student was doing. And she found out that the student was distracted, disruptive, disengaged because they didn't feel like they were good at mathematics. They didn't think that they could do it. And so this now became about helping that child develop a mathematical identity, right? But now she knew what she needed to do. But it started with that one step, that experiment of changing and doing some of those other things. And then this arrow brings us over to observation. She found out something else. It wasn't about that student being distracted. It wasn't about that student being disengaged or disruptive. It was about that student feeling like they couldn't be successful. And a friend of ours used to say, lots of students, lots of kids would rather be seen as bad or disinterested than stupid, right? And that mathematical identity is a huge piece that they could work on. So there you go. In 30 minutes, hopefully you have an experiment that you can try on Monday or at least next week. It gets quicker even, right? You start and you don't need the paper after a while. You've just got those 5 questions that you're going to make sure that you ask yourself. There's lots more in the book. If you want to learn more, please read that. You can also come later. We're having more of a back and forth. Hopefully it'll be more like the energizing part of this and not just the sit and listening part of it. That's our goal. MCTM is also doing a book study. So if you want to do more of that, there are flyers out at the registration desk. And so if you want to, again, you've seen how it is to be able to share ideas with people from different experiences or people who know you and we're helping out. So that's another possibility. Okay. And let us know how your experiments go. Email us at Designing Math Adventures. You can email me here at Grand Valley. Kathy's retired. She does not.
Don't email me.
She don't email her.
Just kidding. You can email me
Okay.
through him.
Make sure you go to Innovators Compass. You can email or contact Ella, let her know how things went with your experiment. Or you can also hear Ella talk about the compass and how teachers are using it on the podcast that John Golden and I do called Teaching Like Ted Lasso. So thank you so much. We do really appreciate you and all that you do and that you'd come here and do the work that you're doing. We are excited to see how you end up changing math education.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, our volunteers. Please say that again. Writing for sketches.
So is that the same for our?
No, it's for different. Also, I want to remind you that you all won the raffle. If you're a participant or a speaker, yes, you get a book, you get a book, you get a book, right? And they are at the book table, which is, when you go up and you go back out into Mackinac Hall, the book table's right there. They'll just tell them your name, they'll check you off, give you a book. And that is perfect because then you can participate in the book study if you want. You want to buy your book. So, All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can,